I'm really lucky to have this outside space, but I know that not all of you have that luxury. So I'm going to show you how to make your very own kitchen garden. Let's get going. This video is going to be a beginner's guide to seed sowing, and also a bit later on in the video I'm going to show you how to start your herbs indoors. If you're super confident with your seed starting, you can skip right ahead and go to here. But if not, stick around because I'm going to go through all the basics of seed sowing with you indoors. Now, one of the first things that you need to think about when it comes to seed sowing is what zone you are in. And I'm sure you've watched 1,000,000,001 videos where they talk about this zone but never really explain what it is. Essentially, your zone is based on where you live and your climate, and that is going to affect when you start to sow your seeds. However, we are just sowing seeds indoors, so we don't need to worry about that too much. When it comes to sowing seeds outdoors, you're going to have to pay a little bit more attention to your zone. But once again, this is a balcony garden, container gardening channel. So for me personally, on my cloud garden, my micro environment is completely different. Because of the glass railings, my garden can be 10 to 15 degrees warmer than at ground level, but it also has the glass railings which protects it from the frost. So therefore, although I know that my garden is in zone 9B, the rules around zones don't really apply to me, and it could be the same for you on your balcony garden. Now, in order to find your zone, all you need to do is go to Google, do a quick search and ask what zone you're in. It can be really confusing knowing what equipment you're going to need for seed starting. Now, you can head to your local store and find some really great pots and containers. But you know what? Sometimes that can be a little bit pricey. I've stopped buying containers and pots for seed sowing. I prefer to reuse materials. And if you're an OG to the channel, you know I call them ratchet containers. Goodbye, I'm not paying any more money for any new containers when I can just repurpose things around my house and keep the costs down a little bit lower so that I can go and buy some more plants. Let me show you what I've been using for my seed starting. I just use any old container I can find, and then to keep the humidity, I'll either use cling film or just attach another package on top. Then we get to another important question. What do we grow in? Now, in the UK and the US, there's a slight difference in what we call compost. For us in the UK, compost is our normal growing medium, is what we buy from our garden centres. Whereas I think in the US, you guys call it a potting mix. In the UK, you can use your compost that you buy from the store to start your seeds, but sometimes you can find different mixes. So let me show you one that I've got here. I picked this one up from the store. It's seed and cutting compost, and this one is actually peat free. Now with these mixes, they've got slightly different components to them. They might have some additional really beneficial bacteria that could help with the start of your seed's life. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to go and buy anything fancy. You can just use regular compost. This is a tiny pea seed. It's amazing because this one little seed has got everything that this plant needs to survive. It's packed full of proteins and energy, just enough to give it its first few sets of leaves. And that means that actually during the whole germination process, we don't need to add in any extra fertilizers. If you add your fertilizers too young, you're going to end up burning some of the roots. So your best bet is to wait until at least you see a first set of true leaves. Now, if you've ever tried growing seeds at home before by yourself and it didn't quite go to plan, or maybe your germination rate was really low, there could be a couple of really simple reasons why. Now, every single one of these seeds have got a completely different requirement to germinate. So some seeds are really tiny and some are huge, but some seeds need light to germinate and others need complete darkness. So your best bet is always to check the back of your packet because that will give you some instructions on how the seed needs to be sown. What I found in my experience is the smaller the seed, the more likely it is that they are going to require some form of sunlight. So they are going to require about a half a centimetre's worth of soil on top, if any, in order to germinate. Whereas something a bit bigger, like a broad bean, for example, you would probably want to make a hole around about an inch deep to plant your seed. Now, if you are indoor seed sowing, you've got options. If you've got a really bright sunny windowsill, by all means use that windowsill. If you struggle for light, you might want to invest in getting a grow light. Now, grow lights are super handy and they can really help you speed up the germination process, but also the growing process for your indoor seeds. Now, there's plenty of information out there on grow lights. If you want me to do more on that, please let me know in the comments below. I personally tend to use my grow lights for 12 hours a day. Now, the trick with your grow lights is to have them as close to your seed babies as possible without burning them. So you're looking for your grow lights to be round about a foot above your seedlings. I personally have found that the red and blue, they do a better job of penetrating the soil and helping with the germination. So what I tend to do is I seed start using the purple lights, and then I've also got a second set of grow lights which are white and red, and more or less to the plant that kind of looks like the sun. So as soon as the plant is big enough, I'll move it up my grow shelf onto the white and red lights. But you have to be really careful because, as I said, if your grow lights are too far up, then that's going to cause your plants to be really leggy because they're trying to reach to get to the light. Again, you don't have to spend money on a fancy grow light. You can just use a sunny windowsill. So in order to help your plants germinate, you need to keep in mind your soil temperature. So I've got a heated mat, and on my heated mat, I then place my seed tray once it's got the soil in and I've got the seeds on, and that warms up the temperature of the soil. Now, each seed that you sow has a different temperature requirement from its soil, and that is a really important fact. So you might be thinking of putting some of your seeds on a really sunny windowsill, but the temperature of that soil might be too warm, in which case your seeds will not germinate. So you could be sat there thinking, oh, I've done everything right, I've put everything onto a sunny windowsill and my seeds haven't germinated. The seed packet must be wrong. No, you probably just planted it and put it somewhere where it's not going to germinate. Now that we've covered my mini crash course on beginners seed sowing, let's get straight into sowing some of our herbs. Let's get into it. Now, you guys know me, I'm not interested in picture perfect perfection. But here's a look at my indoor kitchen garden. I've got basil, thyme, parsley, spring onions, leeks, pak choy, mint, oregano, curry leaves, and for some reason I've got coleus. But not everything is going so well. I'd overwatered my mint and I had to cut quite a bit back. But if you get a little bit closer, you can see it's beginning to produce new leaves and bounce back. If you look through my indoor herb playlist, you'll find a whole heap of videos where I show you how to water propagate. And as you can see, I've got quite a bunch of plants growing in whatever ratchet containers I can find. Here's some basil. I keep taking cuttings from my original plants, they get bushier, and I get to propagate more plants in water. I've got a whole bunch of seeds that I'm going to start sowing right now, and these are going to help us for our indoor herb garden. But I've got a couple of surprises in here just to help us complete our indoor kitchen garden. So let's get started with the first one. Now, the very first seeds that we're going to be sowing are dill. But before we get to the seed sowing part, we need to think about what we are going to grow our seeds in. So we've got plenty of different options here. I can use some old pots that I've collected, or something that I've made a seed tray out of. Now, with this dill, what I plan to do is just have it on a shelf on my kitchen garden. So with the dill, what I plan to do is directly sow straight into a container this size, and that means that I can just harvest the leaves as and when I need to. If I was to plant in a tray like this, in one of my ratchet containers, it would mean that I would probably end up having to prick out some of these plants to then transplant into a pot. So it makes no sense to do that. I'm just going to go straight ahead and pot it into one of these containers. Now, I filled this container pretty much 3/4 to the top with some of my compost. Now, because this compost was outside, it's already really quite moist. But if you're starting off with dry compost, I'd recommend putting it in a big container and then adding some water. Don't let it get sopping wet, you just want it to be moist. So look at how tiny these dill seeds are.
Ooh, child, they're small, and I have poured way too many out.
They're really quite light. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get some and then sprinkle it across the surface.
Yeah, you should probably use around about half of what I'm using here, but I really like full pots.
That's probably way too many. Then I'm going to add a little bit more soil. Just sprinkle some on the top. Press it down a little bit. And just to make sure, I've got a spray bottle. I'm just going to spray the surface.
It's just regular water in the spray bottle.
Now, if they all germinate, I can just leave them, or I can split the pot and make 2 containers. I'll figure that out a little bit later once I know what the germination's like. Now, it's at this point that actually I would grab some cling film and I would put the cling film over the top, and that is to, in essence, make my very own mini greenhouse. The moisture in the soil will evaporate, it will then condense onto the cling film and then fall right back down. So it's going to have constant moisture. It means I water less, but because we are growing indoors, a cling film layer stops the fungus gnats from getting into the soil.
Ooh. What a mess.
Actually, I did forget like one important thing, and that is to label your container. Now, every single year I make this mistake. I tell myself that I will remember what I planted and when. It's an absolute lie. You always will forget, I promise you. So what you want to do is you're going to write what you've sown. You can then write the variety just in case you forget, and also the date, so you know when you sowed this. The packet says that it will germinate within 14 to 21 days and to place on a warm, sunny position. It says 15 to 20 degrees Celsius. So I think what I'll do is I will place this one on my grow light table, but it won't go onto a heat mat. The next herb that we're going to be growing is sweet Thai basil. Now, with the sweet Thai basil, this is going to need a warmer windowsill, and I'm more than likely going to use my heat mat for this one. But what I do have is the same container size as the dill, but I'm also growing some smaller pots because I'm going to be using these on the cloud garden outside. I've already filled this with compost, but I've also just gently firmed down the soil. I don't want to make it too compact because actually the roots need oxygen in order to breathe.
Here's a closer look at the seeds.
Again, really super small seeds. So, not that you'll be able to see, but I'm just going to sprinkle some on the surface and do the same over here. Again, depending on the germination rate, if more germinate, even better, because I can still separate things. Now, it says that they like to be buried at least a half a centimeter deep. So I'm just going to add in a little bit more compost. There you go. Then I'm going to firm it down a little bit again. And then get my trusty spray. Now, the reason why I'm not using a watering can is because what you can do is you can end up displacing some of the seeds, especially since they're so small. So I find using a spray a lot better, especially because I'm starting off with moist compost anyway. Now I'm going to cover these, and I'm going to put these on the heated mat.
Here's the smallest of my heated mats, and then I've got one slightly larger one. You can already see the condensation in some of the containers on the heated mat. I'll leave a link below in the description box if you want to get one too.
The next two that we're going to plant are mint and rosemary. Now these two bad boys can be quite frustrating because they take the longest amount of time to germinate. You're looking at round about a month for rosemary and 21 days for mint. Now, believe it or not, I actually do have some actual gardening equipment. So for my mint and rosemary, I'm going to be sowing them in this. Now this is a seed tray. It's got cells in it, and it's got a propagation lid, and it also is holeless. So what I can do is I can bottom water. I can place some water in the bottom there, and the seed tray will soak it up as there are holes in the bottom. Now this is going to be handy for me because these are going to be in here for a month or so. What I'm going to be doing is anything that's got a long germination date, I'm going to put into this same container. I've already said my mint and rosemary will be growing in here, but I've also got my Canary Creepers that I'm going to be growing. Now these are obviously not for my kitchen garden. These will be for the cloud garden, but these can take up to 35 days to germinate. So I'm going to put them together in this seed tray. So first things first, I'm just going to fill it with compost.
I dropped in some of the compost, make sure I've got some in the cells, then try and flatten it down, and then gently compact some of the soil into each cell. Once again, not too compact because we want our roots to be able to breathe. First up, we're going to sow the mint seeds. Let's take a look and see just how small these mint seeds actually are. As you can see, they are absolutely tiny. I'm sowing one horizontal row of mint and aiming for about 4 or 5 seeds per cell.
Interestingly enough, this particular variety of mint, the back of the packet clearly instructs us to not cover it with soil. Now in comparison, these rosemary seeds are just a little bit bigger. Let me show you some of these. With these rosemary seeds, the seed packet suggests sowing them 1/2 centimeter deep. So I'm going to pop these in, and then I'm going to cover it with a little bit of soil. I'm getting around about 2 or 3 per cell, maybe 4. Now I just use my seed tray because some of these plants I'm actually going to be putting outside. But what you can do is, if you're sowing your mint or rosemary, you can just use some old containers like this as well and put these onto a sunny windowsill.
And that's exactly what I'm going to be doing with these 2 sets of pots. I'm doing 1 mint and 1 rosemary. I'm going to pop these on a sunny windowsill, and then I'm going to come back in a few weeks' time and show you what everything looks like once it's germinated.
Now we have covered a lot today, I know. So what I'm going to do is break this up. In next week's video, I'm going to show you some more things that we can be growing on our indoor kitchen gardens. We're talking about lettuce, chard, and spinach, all of which you can grow indoors. I'll make sure to leave a list of those seeds that you need in the description box below. And if there's anything that you really want to try growing indoors, let me know in the comments, because I'll go out and I'll get the seeds ready for next week as well. Once again, my indoor kitchen garden might not look perfect, but you know what? It serves its purpose, and I can just add it to my food whenever I want. I hope you've enjoyed hanging out with me, and I hope that the video has given you a little bit of inspiration and encouragement to get started with your own indoor herb or your own indoor kitchen garden. Hopefully I will see you again soon. Bye.
I'll be back with some more how to sow videos next week.